Morning everybody, I'm Noreen and welcome to my kitchen and happy 4th of July. Today is Independence Day and I've been thinking a lot about this for the last couple of days. And you remember when we were kids and being patriotic was important? In school they taught us how important it was that our forefathers fought for our freedom. They taught us our history, and they took pride in helping us understand the sacrifices that people made so that we could live our lives free. I don't see that happening much anymore, unfortunately. And I certainly don't see my children being taught in school about the Declaration of Independence or even about our founding fathers. You know, how many kids do I see today who can't even tell you who George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson were, or Benjamin Franklin, or any number of the people who were present at the First Continental Congress to help make sure that we weren't going to live under oppression anymore, and had the balls to stand up to King George and say, we're not going to take it anymore, and we're going to do our own thing. And if we have to fight and die to make sure that happens, then so be it. We're not afraid of you. I think that somewhere along the line, we lost our gumption. You know, my grandmother and my mom would say, you have no gumption, you have no ambition, you have no drive, no reason, you don't want to, because it's all being handed to you. And I think that's really sad. But it is the 4th of July. And I have, when I think about the 4th of July, I think when I was a kid, how exciting that was. The 4th of July was anticipated. It was exciting. I remember when I was small, what are we going to do for the 4th of July? Of course there was a big barbecue. Sometimes it was a community barbecue. But we could always enjoy, there was always a parade. There was always some celebration of our freedom. A parade and fireworks. And where I live now, we live in a very historical area. Of course, North Carolina was one of the 13 original colonies. And we are among a handful of states that have been fortunate enough to have been visited by George Washington. And the town where I live, George Washington actually came on more than one occasion. And he visited the Tryon Palace, which was the governor's palace here. There's a similar palace in Williamsburg, Virginia. And dotted in many of the colonial capitals, you will find governor's palaces, because that is how they were referred to. The governors were appointed by the king, and they were given a stipend. They were paid a good salary for the day, and they built these very, very lavish homes to live in. The Tryon Palace is what is here in New Bern, and it is a replication of what once stood here, because the Historical Society felt that it was necessary to preserve that history. And every year on the 4th of July, you can go to the Tryon Palace and you can hear the Declaration of Independence read. Now, I know we talk a lot, all the time, about the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution. And I don't think that we can refer to them too often. I think these are the documents that made us free, that based our nation, and that our forefathers saw fit to produce so that future generations would have a reference by which to govern the country. Of course, the first of which is the Declaration of Independence. And I don't think that we can listen to it too often. How long has it been since you read it? How long has it been since you actually heard it read to you? I'm going to read it. So if you'll please indulge me on this 4th of July, I give you the Declaration of the United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without the convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature. He has effected to render the military independent and superior and superior to civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by injury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taking captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by their ties of our common kindred and disavowed these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and in peace friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for their support of this declaration, with a firm reliance of the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. How often do we refer to that? How often do we read it? How often do we hear it and actually listen to it? I think that we have some lessons that we need to remember from our history. I think if we don't, we are in some serious trouble. So when you're having your barbecue today, celebrate your freedom. But don't forget the people who came before you, who died so you could celebrate that freedom. I hope that you'll go and read the Declaration for yourself. I hope that you'll always remember it and that you'll read it to your children. I hope that you'll hear it and you'll understand it. I hope you have a fantastic Independence Day. I hope you celebrate your freedom in the way that you choose. And until next time, I'll see you